Even 95, he's doing 94.99. He's been rated my but the other class, he didn't grade my house. Is it? The name was like a 30. I did that. Are you good? Why didn't you I hate it. I was fine. Are you mad? Look here. Look here. You're mad. Got married. This was such a good. This was all family and shit. What do you mean? I got a higher score than you. Yeah. I'm an essay. I got a higher score than you. You also had a week extension. You had a week extension. But I did it in like 2 hours. If I had a week, I'd look like a Nobel Prize winner. Bro, I did like an hour on my essay. Yeah. Hey, good for you though. I'm just saying. Why are your hands all sweaty now? Well, that's part of being weird. Are you being weird, bro? What? Bro, why you not? Why you not? Good guy. That's so good. That is so good. I literally got a shower version. That's it. Bro, what? All I get are only there. Bro, what? Hold on.
Okay, as we're getting started, so I have Jack's presentation. I think I still need Luke's. Yeah. Okay, great. Cool. I'll just get that on once we get into your presentation. So thank you. Welcome back. Hope you all are having a good week so far. Some kind of cool updates. So actually after class today, we are, I think I've mentioned, we are going to have a new faculty member joining us next fall who will be teaching in communication studies. If you're a major or minor, they'll likely be working with you in some courses. You might know Tony Anderson resigned over spring break, so we'll have a new person joining us in the fall. We are doing some first round interviews this week and next week, and hopefully after that, as we get close to the end of the term, we will be inviting some people to campus who will be sharing a bit about themselves, introducing themselves, and it will be a great chance for you to get to know and perhaps share your thoughts on the candidates, who you would enjoy working with, and we'll open it up to your input and hopefully have an opportunity for extra credit as well if you're able to attend and see some of the things that they do. So just to let you know that that will likely be coming up in the next couple of weeks. I'll keep you updated about events and things related to this process, and got some exciting things going forward. All right, so as we're getting in today, just as a reminder, if you don't know already, your application paper number ones are graded with my feedback and comments on those. Let me know if you have any questions about my feedback as we move ahead. We used time last class to talk about relational dialectics theory, right? This is the theory that suggests that we manage a variety of dialectics or tensions in our relationships. For example, we think about the ideal, what do we want things to look like in life, versus the real, what is the practicality of what we experience. We had a class presentation getting at the ways in which dialectics might be present in thinking about national identity and race. And one dialectic that was discussed in this theory is autonomy versus blank. What is the blank that's on the other side of the spectrum? Yes, connection, right? So on the one end, we want to be our own people. We want the freedom and flexibility to be ourselves, but we also want to feel connected and close and involved with other people. So there's a variety of ways we might choose to manage that, either by totally going with one side, or perhaps we have a day that's a me day, right? It is focused on you being independent versus times where you might spend time with other people. So today, we will be getting into cultivation theory. Cultivation theory is moving in a bit more of a media-oriented direction. So we'll be discussing some of the elements of cultivation theory and how cultivation theory explains how we approach media. Again, we've had a number of media-related theories, and each of these media theories has different assumptions and beliefs. Not all of these media theories agree with each other. For instance, this theory takes much more of a position of media having a lot of power, control, and influence over our lives. So where do you find yourself falling on this spectrum of the theories and their persuasiveness is something we'll be able to continue to explore. And then we have class presentations today from Jack as well as Luke. So cultivation theory is a theory that's gained a lot of attention in media studies, but it's also a theory that we see discussed and utilized in other areas such as psychology and sociology. So what cultivation theory is arguing is a particular focus on television, although other forms of media, as we'll talk about in a little bit, if we think about things like Snapchat, TikTok, and so on, there's an argument that television has a significantly important role in how people think about the world, because this media is telling us stories in a way that's seen as compelling persuasive, and engaging. In particular, television is bringing people together, it's allowing different voices to be heard, and it's ultimately shaping the way that we think about and engage with the world. When we're talking about television, we're talking about the power of media. We're not just talking about fiction, right? It's not just about like how something like a crime show or procedural depicts the process of forensics and solving a crime, right? Like there's so many contrivances, examples of inaccuracies, for instance, taking like a very blurry image and doing a high quality or blown up version that suddenly shows the silhouette being a person in a way that you don't actually get to do in real life. But also the way in which news and depiction of news and a variety of other events might be distorted or change the way that we think about the world, right? Again, the way in which media depicts violence, if it leads, sometimes doesn't fully represent the actual demographics and cases of violence happening in particular regions. For example, violence might be going down in a region, but you would not know it from the headlines, right? So this is a socio-cultural and critical tradition and understanding and making sense of our meaning and assessing the role of power. Taking a mass media approach, again, looking at media that reaches a broader public, takes a positivistic, empirical, and critical approach to trying to understand these elements too. Positivistic insofar as cultivation might be something that we can measure and assess, and a variety of experiments, for example, have been conducted in which they look at the effects of people and their thoughts on a topic after viewing media, but also critical in assessing what broader messages, beliefs, and values are articulated by media and therefore impacting public consciousness. So a lot of applications and ways we can think about this theory, but I think one really good and classic example, as mentioned, is if we think about a lot of television procedurals, crime procedurals, things such as Law and Order, NCIS, and so forth, right? These are shows that generally depict the process of a murder or crime and the way in which investigation and prosecution of that crime unfolds in a way that does not necessarily represent the reality of the legal system in the United States. And as a result, we might have distorted or false beliefs with regard to how this actually works. We know it's TV, but we still might jump to some conclusions and assumptions about how this works. So cultivation theory comes from George Gerbner, who was a professor of communication at the University of Pennsylvania. Again, came from kind of a long legacy of communication scholars who were interested in understanding how media is shaping and influencing our lives and understanding of a variety of issues. So if we're thinking about the core of this theory, right? The core of cultivation theory is the idea that it's making a causal argument, right? An if-then type of hypothesis. If X, then Y, right? In this case, if you think about the idea of cultivation, if you think about it in an agricultural context, right, cultivating soil, getting the crops together in the same way, it's suggesting that media is cultivating, right, causing our conceptions of social reality. The things that we believe, that we know to be true about the world is coming as a result of information we're gaining through media. That doesn't necessarily mean that we're doing this in a totally uncritical way. Oftentimes we know, oh, this is just fiction, this is dramatized. We know we need to take this with a grain of salt. But even when we do that, there are still some things that we take in and process and think are true in a way that doesn't actually represent reality fully, right? So, while we know that certain liberties were taken, we're still understanding and processing information. Again, this is part of why, like, biopics, fictional accounts of history have gained some criticism, because while there might be some events that are accurate, you watch something like Bohemian Rhapsody or Elvis, and there are a lot of problems in how they're depicting those people as historical figures that were dramatized or perhaps represented by the family and other interests that might have glossed over some other details and important components about people's lives that aren't really fully being represented there. So cultivation theory brings about some key assumptions. And again, this is another one of those theories where it's evolving and changing as we think about the changes that have come about through social media. In fact, I think one of the biggest changes that's shaping our understanding of this theory is, well, thinking about like Vine, TikTok, YouTube, what fits in the definition of television, particularly when we think about streaming, targeted content, algorithms, and so forth, right? Interesting time for us to talk about this too, since Netflix just kind of dropped the restriction on password sharing in the United States. HBO Max changed just to Max, right? We're seeing a lot of challenges and turmoil that a lot of streaming companies have had to deal with. We see this in the context of the writer's strike too, and its impact on media usage. So this theory started with television, although it can certainly be understood in other more kind of short form media content. But what this says is that television in particular is shaping the way that society is thinking about and relating to issues. Again, another challenge as we're thinking about this theory and its applicability is that if we think back to when there were very few TV stations, or when there were shows that had significantly higher viewership, like we're talking, in the tens of millions of viewers who regularly tuned into a program, that entered the public consciousness in a very kind of large scale way. These days, if you just have a couple million views, that's generally pretty healthy for a show to be able to continue and move forward, right? So the viewership on the kind of programming like prime time is gone down a lot. In fact, there's a good chance most of us don't have a cable TV subscription. We do watch, we typically do so using streaming. So there's been a lot of changes, but the idea here is that television in particular is in many ways shaping how we think about and how we relate to issues. If you're familiar with the idea of contact theory, right? Contact theory suggests that a population, a group, a demographic that we're not familiar with is one in which we develop greater comfort with if we're exposed to and have, kind of close friendships and relationships with that population, right? I'll give you one example, right? So, former Vice President Dick Cheney, we would think, he's very conservative in a lot of his beliefs, particularly around foreign policy. But one of his daughters is queer, and that's been a topic where he has expressed greater kind of openness and understanding of members of the LGBT community, which we can critique, discuss one way or the other, but just to say that individuals who have a very personal or perhaps family relationship to a population generally have greater understanding, sympathy, or support toward members of that population, right? So contact theory suggests that. Cultivation theory might say, if we are exposed via media to a population that exists outside of our day-to-day interactions, right, we tend to learn about and understand that population through the lens of television and media, right? So again, a lot of my work, a lot of my research is about understanding individuals with disabilities, portrayal of members of LGBTQ communities, and what portrayals of that in media might mean for public perception and reality. For example, many people in the United States report that they do not know an individual in their day-to-day lives who's trans, right? So the depiction of trans people in media is especially important for how populations are more broadly understanding and thinking about these issues, right? So if you look at a lot of the ways that stereotypes and tropes that have been very derogatory for trans populations have been portrayed, that's shaped public attitude and perception, right? Similarly, if we think about portrayal of disability and neurodiversity, right? A lot of portrayals of neurodiversity in film have been characters like Sheldon Cooper or The Good Doctor or Sherlock, right? Where there's a very kind of rigid depiction of a character who's cold, who's emotionally not available, that doesn't represent the complexity of experiences facing that community, and therefore could shape public perceptions and attitudes within members of these communities. So that's a major challenge that cultivation theory is reckoning with too. In what ways do these perspectives and experiences shape some of these challenges? So this also relates to some of the ways in which we engage with television, right? So again, I kind of found a lot of more recent television shows interesting because they're being a lot more subversive. If you watched the recent Disney Plus show WandaVision, right, this was a show that was in many ways parodying a lot of kind of older like sitcom, like I Love Lucy style black and white comedy, as well as kind of more recent 90s, 2000s style comedy too. There was another show, Kevin Can F himself, that did a similar, like, let's take this traditional sitcom and critique the ways in which these types of shows have gender and power dynamics. So we've seen a lot of shifts in terms of how different forms of media and television are engaging with genre. One of the ways is blurring, right? The traditional distinctions between where reality ends and television begins start to become lost for us, especially the ways in which we come to think something is true on the basis of how it's depicted on television, right? If you think about how a crime is committed or how an investigation is conducted, that might be something that television influences us to think about. Bending, right? Bending is portraying sort of the mainstream reality in kind of a funhouse mirror distorted way that's beneficial toward people who are creating and producing that media, right? Toward people in power. Like it's like saying, Elon Musk is great. Look, he's dressed up as Wario on SNL, right? Like trying to portray somebody in a more sympathetic light, or trying to portray like or use headlines and news in a way that's designed to kind of cover up some of the more challenging issues. Blending is, again, kind of taking reality and portraying that in the cultural mainstream. It might be even using terms or phrases that originated through fiction, circulating memes to describe human experience, right? I see the meme all the time. It's like the bit is, it's the like Nick Cage and Pedro Pascal exchange where they're kind of looking at each other. And that's used in a lot of kind of context to describe human experience. So mainstreaming is television sources that dominate our other ideas about the world, right? So when what's depicted on television becomes a part of the cultural mainstream, that's a big kind of change that we see, kind of a chicken and egg type of issue, right? For instance, one classic example is from the TV show Friends, right? The character Rachel was known for a very kind of distinctive hairstyle. And after that show aired, that hairstyle became very popular, and it was actually called The Rachel, right? So showing this kind of blurring and mainstreaming between television and reality. Resonance is the idea that what is depicted on television is seen as congruent with our lives, right? So the idea that what we're watching on the screen is something that makes sense to us or connects with us in our own lived experience. Again, I mentioned one of my favorite kind of recent programs or specials that I saw was Inside with Bo Burnham, which it was particularly capturing for a lot of people the isolation and kind of mental deterioration that we experience under quarantine with COVID. And cultivation is, again, making a causal argument that media is shaping our understanding and engagement with reality. This ties to the notion of mean world theory, right? As mentioned a bit in class, the outside world is this bad, scary, negative place. If it bleeds, it leads, right? We see violence as it's depicted in media. We're very concerned. We engage with said media to try to understand what the heck is going on. So oftentimes that is distorting or shaping the way that we come to understand issues. Even if violence is going down, we might not know it if we check a headline, and therefore we believe that this location or space is more violent than it is. Right? One good example of this, and again, maybe a disconnect between reality and media depiction is, what's going on in Portland? Well, oftentimes, media is going to very much depict that in a particular way. So cultivation theory, it has a number of criticisms. Again, one of the biggest ones that we'll discuss in a little bit that is really worth thinking about as we're understanding the role of televised media is to ask ourselves, to what degree does television have the same influence? If we see a lot of other forms of media that people are using, if we see that sort of viewership of television has gone down, we see that there is kind of a glut of opportunities, programs and things to watch. People are not necessarily all watching the same thing anymore. What does that mean? Does it have the same influence? What does it mean if people are going back, right? They're streaming, they're watching things like The Office, where that aired a long time ago. It's not like necessarily current in the same way, but it's still a major part of public consciousness. Logical consistency, right? Does it make sense together, particularly this causal argument, which can be difficult to prove, that cultivation is actually changing our beliefs, our behaviors, and our attitudes. How do we see that? How do we measure this actual change taking place? That can be difficult. And then scope is another concern. How does television influence society, right? Is this something we see in the United States? How, for instance, does international broadcasting, depictions that might be different internationally, such as the use of censorship, how are those issues kind of happening too, right? You see this in a lot of films where perhaps it has an international release that has some problems or differences that can shape our understanding of these issues too. So there's a lot to discuss here with regard to the role that television might play in the process. All right, so we have two presentations today that'll get more into some of the elements of cultivation theory. So our first presentation of the day is from Jack. And Luke, I'm currently not seeing it in my inbox, but you might want to read. Okay, great. I'll just double check that after this. Thank you for doing that. All right. So Jack, I'll show you here how to navigate. You want to come on up? So you're welcome to use these arrow keys or click as you're working through the slides.
All right, awesome. Hello, my name is Jack, and this is my presentation on Ever Instagram accounts, applying cultivation theory to explore the effects of Instagram on young users' body image by Jen Phillips Stein, Alona Klaus, and Peter Oler. I actually really was interested, like I was really glad that I got cultivation theory, because as somebody who plays video games, like, and always hearing like, oh, video games cause violence, I thought it was really interesting. So the key ideas of this article is that like users of social networking sites, which they call SNSs, adopt new beliefs about the world based on the content that they're exposed to, specifically those that promote thin and fit lifestyles, so like diet culture, which I'm pretty sure we've all seen. And they then utilize this information to cultivate their own self-concept, but also their concept of their surroundings. So this is kind of like the leading idea and like of the article that they were focusing on. So another topic that came up was that SNSs are homogeneous. So trends contribute to homogenization fostered by the blurring of the lines between producers and consumers. So people who produce content and then the people that consume the content. And then this explains how a sort of virtual perspective is built amongst users of a specified SNS. In this case, it's Instagram. And then examine reactions to various different body types of various ethnicities using images from public Instagram accounts. And to make sure that they didn't like know these people, they went to Instagram accounts that had very little views and interaction. I don't use Instagram. And they examined these reactions from both male and female participants because they mentioned that they were interested in the fact that like there's usually like a female skew when discussing body image issues. So that's why they included male participants. And they measured the participants' quantity and quality of Instagram usage, their assumptions about weight in their country, which was Germany, and their attitudes regarding body image and their dietary behaviors. So these are their hypotheses. I just copied them from the article because they were too long. So their first hypothesis was that young adults' Instagram use duration and Instagram browsing activity negatively predict their estimation of the overweight prevalence in the general population. And then their second hypothesis was that young adults' Instagram use duration and Instagram browsing activity positively predict their estimation of the body satisfaction prevalence in the general population. Their third one was young adults' Instagram use duration and Instagram browsing activity negatively predict their own body esteem. And young adults' Instagram use duration and Instagram browsing activity positively predict the weight level they ascribe to bodies of strangers. And their fifth and final hypothesis was that young adults' Instagram use duration and Instagram browsing activity positively predict their dietary restraint. The results was that they observed that a higher rate of Instagram usage was related to restrictive views on the weight of strangers, especially among women, as well as an increased risk for disordered eating among both genders. So disordered eating like anorexia nervosa, and stuff like that. This is despite the higher rate of Instagram usage not being associated with poor views on one's own body image. So while they were pretty secure within their own self-concept of their own body, they were not about others. The results been mentioned were correlational in nature and should be taken with appropriate caution. So it's not like, oh, so it's like exact, it's one-to-one, but this relates to CT's positioning of how the information one consumed via media can skew their views about the world around them. So why did I choose this article? Well, I don't like Instagram very much. I'm a known Instagram hater, but so I felt that it explores a relevant and contemporary issue, when reading the section about cultivation theory in the book, it talks about primetime television, and as Dr. Nam mentioned, a lot of people don't. Yes?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, and as Dr. Nam mentioned, a lot of people don't have television subscriptions anymore. Not subscriptions, back then it was called cable. It explores CT as a means to explain non-self-related issues regarding body image. And then also, I felt that it was really interesting because they use CT as a companion to another theory, social comparison theory, so SCT. And overall, the article brings forth a persuasive argument on why we shouldn't rely on one sole theory to analyze the world around us. I find that using multiple theories is really interesting. So rather, it was important to use them together both as a means of support and as a means of critique. So through this method, we can ensure a better understanding of the data collected, and that data collected is as accurate as possible through our explorations of ideas presented by different theories. And then here's my citation.
Thanks, Jack. I really appreciated your work here. Again, I think a really specific reference to cultivation theory too. And Jack, and Luke, I got your so just great. Yeah, so I really enjoyed how your presentation gets at cultivation theory and the way that it's being used in kind of newer forms of media, right? Because while cultivation theory very much got its start related to television, we're seeing it at play as we're thinking about the use of Instagram to depict body image, the kinds of images and body types that we're seeing depicted on screen, and how people might be influenced or changed as a result of those things, right? And I think as Jack brought up really well, it's not necessarily a one-size-fits-all. A single theory can explain everything about the experiences and influence that media might have over people's lives, right? We have to think about other theories like social comparison theory, how we're making judgments and assessments about what we do relative to people around us. So all that to say, there are definitely useful things in this theory, but a lot of theories like this one don't necessarily explain everything that's going on. There's also a chicken and egg problem, right? For instance, if you are subscribed on YouTube or you check YouTube, there's a good chance that the algorithms and targeting of your recommended videos are going to be based on your activity in the past. That is, rather than cultivating you towards something, you're pursuing something that reinforces beliefs and ideas that you have, taking on a more kind of uses and gratifications approach. So there's a lot to be debated and discussed with regard to media usage in our lives and how that might connect to this theory. So in addition to that, I have Luke's presentation here. Okay, so great. All right, so Luke, you're ready. You're welcome to click or use the arrows as you're working between those slides. Are you ready?
Alrighty, so I have cultivation theory, and my article was how television violence affects audience behavior in the new era, a review on cultivation theory. So some of these key ideas, cultivation theory examines the long-term effects of media exposure on individuals' perceptions, beliefs, behaviors, attitudes, stuff like that. And it suggests heavy exposure to media, particularly television, shapes individuals' views on reality and influences their attitudes and behavior. And the reason that television is such a big part is, in the article, it said in 2016, about 116 million American households had television, whether it was cable or some subscriptions. So a lot of people in America are viewing TV. So this is a pretty broad study. And the theory emphasizes accumulation and long-term nature of media effects. So within the article, they were sorted into two groups, the heavy viewers and then the light viewers is what they were comparing. And the two subcomponents is mainstreaming. I mean, what we talked about in class, kind of just for heavy viewers, construct reality, move towards the mainstream of whatever is being shown on the media. And then resonance is just when the stuff happening is what's really happening in your life too. And it's not only connected to media, but also, or TV only, but also social media. I actually started this presentation on the Instagram article, so I'm glad that I did switch. But yeah, so TV is just the most common media source shared amongst people to be able to do a study on. The article connection, it looks at the relationship between television violence and cultivation theory. And it discusses how researchers have observed the impact of television content on viewers, particularly regarding their impressions of the world and formation of new ideas. The article highlights the excessive use of violence in television program and attention it garners from media researchers. I think if I remember right, a stat that it said in the article is that through primary school, the average kid has seen over 20,000 homicides on TV, video games, whatnot like that, which is kind of mind-blowing when it's put into perspective that that's just really normalized. And there's a bunch of mini studies within this article. It wasn't just one big study with some results, but one of the many ones done was in Egypt through Arabic drama TV. And so they chose 400 adults, Cairo, and they found out that showing of violence in men and women in relationship was actually kind of playing a part in why that was still happening, that it was just normalized, and that was kind of just the reality of that area. And then although the effects of violence television is pretty still heavily debated, as shown in my article, that most theorists are still on different sides of the spectrum of really how much it impacts. But there was three things that came up that all the researchers did share. And imitation was the first, just imitating the violent behavior that they're watching or playing. Catharsis, that these individuals who have maybe aggressive thoughts are able to get their frustration and aggression out by watching it and actually feel more at ease rather than having to carry something out. And desensitization, just the exposure of violence, leading them to accept violence in their life, and just that they accept that it's a part of their life, and seeing it doesn't surprise them, I guess. And it talked about how in different eras it's on TV, different social issues were kind of more brought up. And so in the 60s, we were looking at domestic violence was really being shown. In the 80s, family problems, and then 90s and 2000s when addiction, crime, violence, and immorality all became prevalent within television. So the knowledge I gained of cultivation theory, that it plays a significant role in shaping the viewer's perception and beliefs about the world. Television is viewed as a cultural force that influence behaviors and strengthen existing social values and beliefs. And that the theory argues that television provides a symbolic environment that reflects and reinforces social reality rather than reflecting it. And the violent television viewership came in three parts that the article talked about. And the first being the excitement, just the arousal from the violence and causing them to act more aggressively. Imitation of violence, just imitating scenes of violence because they've been exposed to it so often in their everyday lives. And a transfer of attitudes and values is television transmitting attitudes and values about violence, although they know it's fake. Children and adults look at the rules provided and the relationships as characters as realistic, as in if you guys are watching your favorite TV show and your favorite character does something aggressive, acts out of self-defense, or you just feel like it was the right thing to do because you have that connection with a character. You're gonna say that it's okay because you like the person. And then kind of just to wrap this up, cultivation theory, it offers valuable insights into the effects of media, particularly television, on the viewer's perceptions and beliefs. It highlights the role of television in shaping social reality and the potential impact of violent content on viewers' attitudes and beliefs. Further research is needed to continue exploring the complexities of this theory and its implications because there's not tons of, it's pretty hard to get empirical data on this because you just have a bunch of different sides of the theory, people doing different studies, and it's hard to just get a big group that's all watching the exact same thing. And then, yeah, just not every theorist is in agreement, especially children when their minds are still developing. There's still a bunch of different sides to that. And here's my work site.
All right, thank you, Luke. As bring up in this study, right, there is a lot of debate and discussion about, does film, do video games, other forms of media like encourage or prime violence or lead to increased violence, right? There are some people that can't strongly feel that it does, other people who push back and say, no, this doesn't mean that I'm actually going to hit somebody in real life. The catharsis argument, as explained and presented in the article 2, talks about the role in which, using violent media can be a kind of form of stress relief or reducing the violence or frustration that people experience in real life. So there's a lot to unpack and kind of discuss here. A lot of continued debate on how much and to what degree cultivation is impacting people's attitudes, right? Anecdotally, I was taking a walk yesterday, and when I was out, there was like a 4 or 5-year-old kid who's like holding a stick like a gun and kind of going around to some of the other kids and saying, fire at will. Like, you see that, but you also know that that doesn't necessarily mean that that kid is going to be violent in real life. It's just exposed to a very kind of ubiquitous, media depiction and all of that. But there are other more innocuous ways that you can see this play out too, It's like the Fortnite dance and other like jokes and memes where people are kind of bringing in their interest in games out to the court. So there are ways that we can continue to explore and think about this theory and some of the ways in which cultivation might or might not explain human experience. So I wanted to share a funny example here from, again, a lot of television procedurals that tend to distort or perhaps lead us to believe that the way things play out in fiction are similar to real life. Again, if we think about the third person effect, we think other people are being persuaded and convinced about this, but we aren't. And we tend to underestimate how much we're influenced by media. I want to share kind of the classic example of the idea of computer hacking and the way that computer hacking tended to be perceived and portrayed a lot in media that might distort our understanding of the complexities of this too. Again, kind of an example of how fictionalized media might distort or inaccurately portray what it actually means to be hacked.
No way. No, this is major. It's already burned to the NCIS public firewall.
Well, isolate the node and really double on the other side of the road.
I'm trying to do it best.
Database separate.
He or she is only going after my sheet.
It's not possible. This deal with level 9 encryption would take months. What is that? Video game?
No, 40
The entire NJS know what's next.
I can't stop him. Do something again.
I've never seen hold up yet. No.
Aha, that's how you stop hacking. You just unplug the computer. So, you look at this, and for a lot of us, right, this way of depicting hacking, all these screens showing up, depicting and saying like, I'm in when somebody is hacking. Like a lot of this, obviously, we don't see as true, but if we don't have as much of a frame of reference, right, some of this kind of fictionalized portrayal of things is more likely to be what we mentally associate with these types of issues. So I'm going to ask you to take some time to work in groups and discuss the following questions. Have one person write or type. First of all, is television the only means by which cultivation happens? If not, what it might also be involved in cultivation? How has television changed and how might that impact the cultivation process? And what might be some beliefs that you as members of the group have that might come as a result of cultivation too? So let's go ahead. We will do a group of 3, 1, 2, and 3. We'll also do a group of 3, 1, 2, and 3. We'll do a group of 1, 2, 3, and 4. We'll do a group of 1, 2, 3, and 4. And then we'll do a group of 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. So take some time to chat about these questions. Have somebody write or type for your group, and we'll talk about this together.
I don't want to talk about it. Yeah. A lot of things.
But I think media portrays, no matter what it is, you're a failure.
Yeah.
Take about 2 or 3 more minutes to continue your discussion here. Okay, so I'm curious, what are other spaces where folks see cultivation? So feel free to share, raise your hand from your group if there were other sources of cultivation that you discussed or found. Yeah.
You said,
yeah.
Pretty much any media that can be intake, as in video games, social media, places.
Yeah. So one thing to think about here is the kind of cold versus hot media discussion we had, right? How much sensory engagement does this thing have? We're less likely to be cultivated by an email or BuzzFeed article, much more likely to be cultivated by watching something that's interactive, that's engaged. That's part of why, again, social media like Snapchat and TikTok is as popular as it is, and its ability to engage with different senses. So I think we can also conclude that this kind of multi-sensory engagement is also going to make for stronger cultivation. So how have we seen this change over the last several years in cultivation? Let's hear from this group over here.
Yeah, just television has fallen out of favor in favor of more of the pop media that you previously mentioned, and those are just growing in popularity and kind of need for social interaction, but they social topical.
Right. So part of it is that some of these more short form forms of media, not only is it free or accessible, but it's also something that allows us to build some type of social need or connection to, which we might not experience if we're just watching a TV show. And then what might be some beliefs that we experience as a result of cultivation? Let's hear from this group here in this front corner. Was there anything that you realized that you felt as a result of cultivation?
So we kind of believe that people that have like niche skills are able to help solve crime. Austin was saying he was watching a show called Deception, where an illusionist pretty much works with the FBI to solve crime. They come super quick.
Yeah, so one way of thinking about this is cultivation is stronger for us when it's on topics, issues, people that we have less of a personal relationship or frame of reference for. If the only way that we're getting access to some of those things is through the use of media, then typically we're going to be more likely to trust that compared to alternatives. So that's kind of where we see cultivation happening. If we have real world stuff that contradicts what we see cultivated and conveyed via media, we're less likely to take on that attitude and belief. And cultivation, it's a period of time. It's not just, I watch an episode of a TV show and I think this way. It's the accumulation of media that consistently portrays something in a certain way, contributing to our feelings of trusting that depiction more because we see it portrayed in the exact same way again and again, even though it might be a trope or stereotype about how that topic gets used. So to discuss some of the ideas we went over, we talked about cultivation theory, its attitudes and beliefs in changing our own lives. So as we prepare for application paper 2, continue to think about topics or issues that you might be interested in exploring. Again, cultivation theory can work as an example here. On Friday, we will get into cultural studies. So we'll have a presentation from Joey on cultural studies. So look forward to that. Please pass forward or email your group work for the day with your names on it. Have a great rest of your day, and I will see you again for Friday's class.